Hello everyone, some old man. As you may gather from watching some of my other videos up till now, I'm a lot of things. Gardener, Toastmaster, prepper, ham, Santa Claus. We haven't talked about that one yet. I've gotten involved in a lot of activities that I've never found interesting when I was a younger man. Yes, I'm an odd man. I have a penchant for jumping into new interests and obligations when my time is already consumed. As I said, one of my interests is Toastmasters, a public speaking organization that I joined in 2007. I have found during the last 13 years that I actually enjoy talking to people, in spite of being an introvert at heart. Many of the speeches that I present are on the topics of gardening, preparedness, ham radio, and so forth. For a good portion of that time, I've become more interested in preparedness, initially fumbling along on my own and later learning what I could from available resources. Initially, the Survival Podcast by Jack Spirko, and more recently by various other YouTubers, each presenting their own views of the world and thoughts about the best way to prepare for disaster or just life in general. Now, I am no expert at much of anything. I am not an expert prepper, although I get by. I think I'm establishing a pretty good base of operations. I am certainly not a great gardener. I have gone ahead and gotten a few things out of the garden, but most years it has been truthfully an abysmal flop, and I get one or two things that would produce well. I am not the world's greatest speaker, so I get by in Toastmasters, but I'm in awe of some of the folks who are really good at it. I'm certainly not a great ham. I've had my ticket, an extra ticket, for over 10 years now, and I'm just barely talk on the radio ever. Maybe I need to spend more time there. But I find it interesting that I do these things. There's a whole lot of other ones that I mentioned. I'm Santa Claus in December, but I don't do the full on thing that some older men do, partly because I'm still working, and maybe I'll be better later. There are a lot of other things that I haven't even mentioned. For instance, I volunteer with my HOA. Not as much as I had in the past, but I still do some of the things for their architectural committee. 2, I volunteer as a poll worker, and I've been doing that almost as long as I've been doing Toastmasters. And there's just so many other little things that I do. Part-time, I've given up some of the things that I have done when I was 10 or 15 years younger, 20 years younger. 20 years ago, I was a little bit into scuba diving. It's an expensive hobby, and I just don't have time to keep it up, so I kind of put it on the shelf. So many things. And as my health declines, I'm not into some of the more active ones. But anyway, I wanted to talk tonight about why I am making a YouTube channel. Now, as I've said, I've done a lot of things in my life. And starting about the time that we had our house built, I started doing things to improve it, or at least upgrade it in the way I wanted it. Admittedly, none of them I had in mind. I didn't have in mind what I've done now at the time, but I started doing gardening things. I started building the shed and all these things. The fence was not original. We built that. And At the time, YouTube was not even a thought in anybody's head. That was 20 years ago. At the time, we would take pictures. And God, I wish that some of those pictures survived, but one computer crash is all that it takes, and there's been 2 in that time since then. Now, of course, everything is recorded not only to the hard disk with the computer, but 2 external hard disks. I'm paranoid. You get that way when you're in the industry for a while. But if I had started a blog when I was building the shed and doing some other projects at the time. I wish I had some of those records. I cannot find them anymore on the web. They're long gone. I took pictures of different phases of developing the garden, and I have found all the way back to about 2016, but the photos then were rare. Now, the last couple of years, YouTube has really exploded. Before that, podcasting was, fairly a standard thing, and I was thinking, yeah, that's something I'd like to do, and you know what? It kind of goes along with what I do in Toastmasters. But with podcasting, it was voice only, which was okay, but now we've got the video element with video podcasting. And there are a lot of podcasters that I watch, not some regularly and some just occasionally. Well, I decided, you know what? I can do this. Maybe not as well as some, because you know what? A lot of the things I do are good enough, but not great. I don't expect to get 1 million followers. Right? Last time I checked, I think I had 12. And if all of you who watch me tell your friends and say, hey, this guy's a joke, but he's fun to watch, maybe it'll go up to 20. We'll see. Anyway, I decided that a podcast was something I could do, and it gives me another outlet to practice public speaking, in effect, about things that I want to talk about. I admittedly don't get as much feedback from this media as I would in the Toastmaster setting, but that's okay. I want to talk about things that I want to talk about. I want to show you what I'm doing in my garden. I'm not saying that this is the way to garden. No, I'm saying this is the way that I'm gardening right now. Next year it may be different. I'm telling you some of the things that I'm doing for prepping. I don't think that prepping is for everybody. Some people just won't do it, but I think everybody should. I think this country is in a world of hurt, and it's gotten worse for the last 3 or 4 presidential cycles. I don't know if it can get recovered now, because we are upside down in debt. It's another problem, and somebody else could probably talk about it more. I'm just prepared if food shortages kick in, which they look like they might. So I hope you have a little bit stored by. I made a trip to the local warehouse store over the weekend and made one more load of things that I could add to my preps. I don't expect to go back again. It's probably going to be too late, because I noticed certain things were starting to look a little thinner. But that may just be, my perceptions based on what I've been listening to on YouTube. Anyway, creating the web page was just, I decided to do it. What tools do I use? Well, I started looking on the web and Googling for best tools for video recording. And I got pointed to this Video Proc Recorder. Supposedly it was best of the best according to PC somebody. I find it's kind of okay, it does a decent job, but it's not great. For actually compiling my videos, I ended up with Cyberlink Power Directory, and that one is actually pretty good. Early on, I dabbled with the Cyberlink Audio Director, but it was even more expensive than Power Director for one feature that I could have used. And I said, well, you know what? I don't need this reverb echo thing that I played with for about 4 episodes. So I said, okay, we don't need that. It's not that important. So I'm using these 2 tools and now my cell phone, but before I had a cheap Chinese camera which half the time wouldn't record, so I decided my cell phone was better. Someday I may graduate to a iPad or iPod or whatever it is that the Mac folks come up with, but we'll see. My phone seems to be doing a good job. But anyway, I use these tools to go ahead and assemble these things. As far as what I talk about, well, as you've seen, if you've been following me for any length of time, most of it is about my garden. I will talk about prepping occasionally. On a rare occasion, I'll just babble on about whatever I happen to feel like talking about. Today's case in point. But mostly, I'll probably talk about the garden because that's most of what I'm doing right now. When I talk about something else, it'll be because that's what I happen to be doing right then. Anyway, that's the genesis of Some Old Man's Podcast. And the name? Well, it's descriptive of me. I'm just some old man, or some odd man, depending on how you want to put it together. And the way I've spelled it, OLDD, covers both the bases. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little talk, and maybe come back tomorrow, and I'll be back in the garden, probably Tuesday. I think that I'd like to go ahead and talk about that new section that I'm building behind the shed, but I was hoping to get back behind there with my level and actually take some elevations on that today. Unfortunately, Mother's Day came in and we ended up not having any time. So that's pretty much it for now. Some Old Man signing off.